The station was too bright, too loud, too full of lives rushing past one another. Trains shrieked on their tracks, voices tangled in the air, footsteps beat against the marble floor. She stood among them, small, still, unshaken on the outside but trembling inside, her hand tightening around the handle of a worn leather suitcase. The case was light, too light. Everything she carried now fit into its narrow frame. Her scarf, a deep red that caught in the cold morning draft, fluttered like it wanted to leave before she did. She pulled it tighter around her neck, as if the fabric could guard her from the hollow ache swelling in her chest. She wasn't waiting for anyone. Not really. Her eyes darted to the departure board anyway, as though searching for a destination that might make sense of her unraveling life. The letters clicked and shifted, cities appearing and disappearing in neon glow. She could have chosen any of them. But freedom wasn't in geography, it was in what she was about to do. Her fingers trembled as she slipped a card from her pocket. His card. The weight of it pressed sharp against her palm, metallic, wrong, and yet, suddenly, for the first time in months, hers. She stared at the embossed name, his name, the letters carved into her future like an insult she was about to rewrite. Her breath caught. She remembered his voice from last night, so casual, so cruel. You don't need your own account. I'll handle the money. Handle. He had buried her beneath numbers, beneath rules, beneath silence. Now, the card gleamed like a weapon. She thought of the account he had hidden, the months she had lived under his quiet theft, the way his shadow had stretched across every bill, every purchase, every dream. She thought of the secret he thought would stay buried. And she thought of how wrong he was. A man brushed past her, knocking her shoulder, and the suitcase rocked against her shin. She caught it quickly, clutching the handle like an anchor. The red scarf slipped from her neck, fluttering to the floor. She bent, picked it up slowly, and for a moment, her eyes lingered on the fabric resting in her hand. A reminder. A promise. The announcement for Track 7 crackled overhead. Her train. Her exit. She lifted her head, scanning the sea of strangers who didn't know her name, her story, or the war in her chest. For a split second, she wondered if he was somewhere behind her, watching, waiting, already knowing. Her heart thudded against her ribs. She stepped forward. And then, paused. The scarf slipped through her fingers as she adjusted it once more, the fabric whispering against her skin. She held it close, though she wasn't sure if it kept her warm or just reminded her she could still hold something of her own. She shifted the suitcase, the leather cool against her palm, and a memory slipped in, uninvited. Her father's voice. A younger her, standing in their cramped living room, clutching this same suitcase years ago. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small because of what you carry, he had said, watching her pack clothes for her first job interview. He had smiled then, tired but proud. Sometimes the lightest bag holds the heaviest truth. Now, standing in the station, she felt the weight of his words settle heavier than the suitcase itself. Around her, the world kept moving. A child squealed as his mother lifted him into her arms, their laughter filling the air. A man dropped to one knee, slipping a ring onto a trembling hand while strangers clapped. People were reuniting, beginning, returning. She was leaving. Alone. Her chest tightened. She wondered what her father would say if he saw her now, clutching another man's credit card like a lifeline, using it not for comfort, but as a blade to cut herself free. Would he call it strength? Or desperation? The announcement echoed again, softer this time in her ears. Track 7. Departure in 10 minutes. She turned, scanning the platform. That's when she saw him. A stranger, leaning against a column, eyes lowered at first, then rising slowly to meet hers. He didn't smile. Didn't speak. Just watched. The kind of watch that didn't press, didn't demand, but lingered, like he had been standing there long before she arrived, as if waiting for something unspoken. She swallowed, looking away too quickly, heat rising in her throat. She told herself it was nothing. Just another passenger. Just another shadow in the blur of the station. But when she glanced back, his gaze hadn't moved. Her pulse quickened. She clutched the scarf again, fingers curling around the fabric until her knuckles whitened. It wasn't just cloth anymore, it was armor, a shield against the silence, against the secrets. Against him. Against the memory of last night when she found the bank statements, hidden in plain sight inside his drawer, mocking her with every number. The suitcase tilted as she shifted her weight. The crowd surged forward, pressing closer to the track, and she felt herself swept into motion. But then, she stopped. Her body froze, though her heart hammered forward. She turned her head slightly, almost involuntarily, back toward the column. The stranger was still there. His gaze steady. His silence louder than the train. And then, just as her lips parted, as if to ask a question she hadn't formed, he gave the faintest smile. Not warm. Not cruel. Just enough to blur certainty into confusion. She didn't move. Not yet. The platform groaned with movement as more passengers pressed toward the waiting train. Somewhere above, clouds gathered, smudging the morning light into a gray wash. The air thickened, damp with the taste of rain before it fell. She tried to steady her breathing. One step forward and she would be gone, out of his reach, out of her own hesitation. Yet her gaze betrayed her. It returned, uninvited, to the man at the column. He had shifted now, just slightly, his weight carried unevenly on worn shoes, the soles fraying at the edges. They didn't belong to someone careless, she thought. They looked like they had walked too far, too long. His coat, too, bore a tear at the seam, hastily stitched as though by his own hand. Details that whispered struggle rather than style. Her suitcase strap dug into her palm as she turned, ready to shake him off, when something slipped from his jacket pocket. A wallet, tired, softened at the corners. He caught it quickly, but not before she caught a glimpse of the edge of a photograph inside. A child's face, blurred by motion, but smiling. Someone waiting for him. Or someone lost. The train doors slid open with a hiss. Passengers surged forward, urgency swelling. Yet she stood rooted, her chest knotted tighter. The scarf stirred against her collarbone as a breeze rushed through the station, carrying the first patter of rain against the glass roof. The droplets spread like fractures above her, cracking light into trembling shards. Her eyes flickered back to the stranger. He was watching her still, no, not just her, but the suitcase, the scarf, the hesitation wrapped around her like a second skin. It felt as if he could see not just her face but the years of silence, the account she had never touched, the marriage that had swallowed her whole. For a moment, his silence became a mirror. His frayed shoes, her emptied bank account. His stitched coat, her patched-together courage. His hidden photograph, her red scarf. Both of them carrying something broken, something buried. But then, a thought split through the fragile connection. What if the mirror was not reflection, but trap? The station lights flickered with the roll of thunder overhead. The rain grew heavier, pounding now, drowning voices, blurring the edges of the world outside the platform. She took a step toward the train, then stopped again, pulse racing against her ribs. The scarf slipped loose, sliding down her shoulder. She caught it just in time, her fingers trembling. And when she looked up, the stranger had moved closer. Not far, not threatening, but nearer than before. The distance between them narrowed. She gripped the suitcase. He tucked the wallet back into his pocket. Their eyes met, steady, unblinking. The train's departure whistle shrieked, slicing through the station. Still, she didn't move. And neither did he. The whistle faded into echoes, swallowed by the station's rising hum. She should have moved then, onto the train, away from him, away from the shadows of what she had just begun to tear apart. But her feet betrayed her. They carried her 3 steps forward before faltering, halting her at the edge of departure. Her breath caught, sharp in her chest. She bent slightly, as though to lift the suitcase higher, but the truth was different. She was hiding her trembling. Her hand brushed against the red scarf where it dangled loose, and in her distraction, it slipped from her grasp again. This time, it landed between them. The scarf lay on the marble floor, an accusation, a bridge, a thread pulled taut across their silence. He moved first. Slow, deliberate. He bent, fingers grazing the fabric, lifting it with a gentleness that did not belong to strangers. When he straightened, the scarf hung from his hand like a ribbon of unfinished words. Their eyes locked. He didn't offer it back immediately. Instead, his gaze lingered, as though testing whether she could survive the weight of his silence. Finally, he spoke. His voice was low, unpolished, carrying a tired edge that made it sound truer. "Some people carry more than just bags," he said, almost to himself. "They carry silence." Her throat tightened. The sentence hovered between them, threading into her thoughts like it belonged to her, like he had reached inside and named what she hadn't dared to. She didn't answer. Couldn't. A woman brushing past muttered, blocking the way, her tone laced with irritation. Another man glanced at her suitcase, then at the stranger, his look sharp with unspoken judgment, as though their stillness had made them guilty of something indecent. She shrank under those glances, a flush rising hot against her skin. Society had always been there, ready to measure, to whisper, to point. Even now, even here, when she stood on the edge of leaving everything behind, their eyes followed like a sentence she couldn't escape. Her hand reached, hesitating in the air, waiting for him to return the scarf. The weight of her father's words, the memory of her husband's lies, the echo of her own unspent anger, all gathered in the fabric stretched between them. But he didn't release it at once. His grip remained, light but unyielding, as though asking her to decide whether to take it or to leave it hanging. The train hissed again, doors threatening to close. Passengers glanced impatiently, muttering as they squeezed past. Time was dissolving. Her breath trembled. She almost turned, almost walked away, almost let the scarf fall from both their hands. But at the last second, she looked back at him. That look broke something open. Not a resolution. Not an answer. Only the ache of something unfinished, suspended in air, waiting. The scarf remained suspended between them, fabric trembling in the draft of the departing train. She pulled it back at last, tucking it against her chest as though reclaiming something more than cloth. His hand lingered a second too long in the air, then dropped to his side, fingers curling slowly. She turned away, yet the stranger's presence clung like smoke. Her steps were quick, almost frantic, dragging her suitcase toward the far corridor of the station. Away, away, away. But she hadn't made it 10 paces before she froze. A poster. Bright, corporate. A smiling logo she recognized immediately, Rivers and Hale Investments. The same company where she had sent her resume 2 weeks ago. The same company her husband had sworn she'd never be good enough for. And beneath the logo, framed in glass, an announcement of the new acting director. She blinked. Her throat went dry. It was him. The stranger at the column. The man with worn shoes, stitched seams, and a silence that weighed heavier than words. His photograph stared back at her, polished, professional, stripped of the exhaustion she had seen in real life. The scarf nearly slipped from her grip again. Her mind reeled, the fragments colliding, his watchful eyes, his silence, the photograph in his wallet, the words he had spoken. Some people carry more than just bags, they carry silence. Was it his silence that had drawn her, or his power? both twisted now into something she couldn't untangle. Her breath came sharp, uneven. Her father's voice returned like a loop from the past. Sometimes the lightest bag holds the heaviest truth. She finally understood. Truth could disguise itself in ragged shoes as easily as in polished shoes. And either way, it carried weight enough to break her. She could no longer pretend she was just running from her husband. The path forward was no longer escape, it was collision. Her pulse hammered in her temples. She was standing on a threshold she hadn't chosen but could not refuse. Behind her, she felt rather than saw the stranger move closer. His presence wrapped around her like the gathering storm outside, pressing against her lungs. She didn't turn. She couldn't. Instead, she pulled the suitcase tighter, the scarf wound once more around her throat, armor now, not comfort. Her legs carried her, steady this time, not toward the train but toward the station doors leading to the upper floors. Toward the offices. Toward him, not as stranger, but as something else entirely. Each step was heavier, sharper, irreversible. She walked into the glass doors, into the building whose name gleamed above her head. Into a decision that would change everything. The station had emptied by the time she returned. Hours had passed, yet it looked the same, the marble floors slick with rain, the departure board flickering, the air heavy with echoes of voices now gone. Only she was different. Her suitcase felt heavier now, though she had left half its contents behind in that glass building upstairs. She had not expected to confront him there, not as a stranger, but as a man with a name, a title, a life carved into polished plaques. And yet, he had waited. The scarf had slipped from her shoulders again in that office, falling silently between them like it had been destined to. He picked it up carefully, laying it on the desk as though it were sacred. His voice was quiet, the same rasp from the platform, but steadier now. "You remind me of her," he said. Her breath caught. She didn't have to ask who. The photo in his wallet, the blurred face. His daughter. Gone. For a moment, she was no longer a woman betrayed, or a wife planning revenge. She was a mirror he could not stop looking into. And that was the twist. He didn't offer her comfort. He didn't offer her escape. He offered her something sharper, recognition. "You fight because silence has already taken too much from you," he continued. "I've seen it before." Her heart trembled, not from his words, but from the truth inside them. She had come here to strip her husband's power, to rewrite her future with stolen cards and borrowed names. But standing in that office, scarf trembling in his hands, she realized she could not build freedom on theft. Not anymore. So she gave it back. The card. His card. She laid it on the desk between them, the way he had laid down her scarf. A trade. An ending. She thought he would dismiss her then. Instead, he nodded, almost imperceptibly. Not every fight is meant to be won. Some are meant to be walked away from. The words lodged in her chest like glass. Now, back at the station, she stood where the story had begun. The red scarf wrapped firm around her throat, not fluttering anymore, but still. She was still trembling, but this time from release, not fear. The announcement board shifted again. A train appeared, one heading somewhere she had never thought to go. She didn't need a plan, not yet. She needed movement, breath, the first step of a new rhythm. As she moved toward the platform, she felt the judgment of strangers once more, eyes following, whispers brushing. But for the first time, she didn't shrink. The scarf trailed at her side, catching the air, not as a shield, not as a burden, but as a thread of memory carried forward. She stepped onto the train. The doors closed. Through the glass, she thought she saw him one last time, watching, silent, a ghost tethered to his own grief. Neither of them lifted a hand. Neither needed to. Her suitcase rested beside her, light as air. Not every stranger you help is meant to stay, but some leave you changed forever. The night was quieter than she expected. The city streets, slick from rain, reflected the street lamps in trembling pools of light. She walked without hurry, suitcase wheels clicking softly against the pavement, her scarf looped loosely around her neck. No crowd now, no station noise, no strangers pressing forward. Just her, and the sound of her own breath. She paused beneath a bridge where the river moved dark and restless. For a long moment, she simply watched the current tug at floating leaves, carrying them without question. She thought of how much of her life had been like that, drift, surrender, silence. But she wasn't drifting now. She was walking. Choosing. At the small apartment she had found weeks ago, her hidden escape before she had even dared to call it one, she unlocked the door and stepped inside. The space smelled faintly of dust and lavender, a forgotten corner of her life waiting for her return. She set the suitcase down. Not with heaviness, but with release. The red scarf slipped from her shoulders again, this time falling across the dresser. She didn't lift it. She let it rest there, soft under the lamplight, no longer armor, no longer burden. Just fabric. Just memory. Her fingers brushed it once, gently, as if sealing its new place in her story. She whispered into the stillness, half to herself, half to the ghost of the stranger's voice, "Sometimes love is not romance, it's recognition." The words lingered, warm and raw. Recognition had been enough. Enough to break something open inside her. Enough to remind her that silence wasn't survival, it was surrender. And she had surrendered long enough. Through the thin curtains, she watched the lights of the city blinking in quiet rhythm, each one a life moving, pausing, beginning again. She thought of her father's voice, her husband's shadow, the stranger's silence. Each had shaped her, pressed against her. Each had given her something to carry. And yet, here she was. She drew a breath that trembled but did not collapse. For the first time, she didn't need to know what came next. The future was not a destination, not a train, not a company logo or a hidden account. It was a door she had already stepped through. Her eyes closed for a moment, the quiet wrapping around her like a second skin. Not every wound needs to be explained. Not every ending needs to be clean. And maybe strength is not found in the battles we win, but in the silences we finally break.